Hello there, and thank you for joining us for Invasive Species Awareness Week. My name is Julie Hart, and I'm the Senior Manager of Stewardship and Education at the Dutchess Land Conservancy. So what are invasive species, and why are we so concerned about them? Well, it's not the easiest concept in the world to define, but in general, an invasive species is one that is not native to the area, and it has a tendency to spread to a degree that's believed to cause damage to the environment, the economy, or human health. Now, often this damage comes in the form of competition with the native species. The invasive may be hogging all the sunlight, the water, or other resources that are needed to thrive. Another category of invasive species are the pests and pathogens that are affecting our forests. Some of them have been here for a long time, such as chestnut blight or Dutch elm disease, while others, like emerald ash borer, are relatively new to our area. Now, ecologically speaking, one of the issues with invasive plants and animals is that they don't generally fit into our local food webs, and that's because they didn't co-evolve with our local plants and animals. First, let's take a look at Japanese barberry. This shrub was introduced from Japan in the late 1800s, and it escaped from cultivation and has become widely naturalized in our area. Like a lot of invasive species, it tolerates a wide variety of soil, light, and moisture conditions, but this one's a little unusual because it can even establish itself in the shady areas of a closed canopy in a mature woodland. You often see it along roadsides, forming shrubby thickets, and as I said, often in disturbed woodlands. Barberry tends to grow in this very dense and compact shrub form. You see the leaves are very small and oval, and they grow in these little clusters. Now, each cluster has a single needle-like spine, usually on the underside of the stem. And if you get too close to this shrub, you will definitely learn about those. This barberry has already bloomed. It usually blooms late April to early May. The flowers are pale yellow and quite fragrant. And later on in the year, you can see that these tiny little fruits that are visible right now will become the mature fruits and seeds of the barberry plant. In terms of controlling Japanese barberry, it's a very persistent invasive species and it's very difficult to control. Mowing can suppress the growth, but it doesn't kill the plant. And even if the plant is removed, it can resprout from root fragments. And here's the multiflora rose. This is a shrub that was introduced also from Japan in the late 1800s, and it was planted extensively for erosion control, wildlife habitat, and livestock fences, just because it does have such a spreading habit. This is what the foliage looks like. The leaves are compound, meaning it's a single stem with multiple leaflets around it. And here you can see the unopened flowers. This usually blooms in early June in our area, and the flowers, when they open, are going to be white and fragrant. After the flowers have been pollinated, they'll develop into the fruit of this rose bush. They're called rose hips, and they're very small, bright red, and usually quite numerous. When you see these plants in the fall, you'll see them just covered in these tiny red rose hips. When they drop off of the plant, those seeds in those fruits can remain viable for up to 20 years. And just like the barberry, this is a plant that will tolerate a very wide range of soil, light, and moisture conditions, but it does grow best in well-drained soils where there's lots of sunlight. It's very common in hedgerows, along roadsides, and at forest edges, and it often forms really impenetrable, thorny thickets that are just impossible to get through. Now, because the multiflora rose is so well established in our area and so common, it's really difficult to control it. And even if it's locally eradicated, it's very likely to return. Remember how those seeds can remain viable for 20 years? So even if you mow the plant down, the seeds are still going to be viable in the soil and it'll just keep coming back. Now, you can control it locally. You can mow it frequently, cut down the shrubs, and mow the sprouts that keep coming up. Several times a year, you need to do that, or it'll get out of control very quickly. But believe it or not, goats and sheep will actually eat this stuff, and that has actually become a pretty common and well-accepted control method in our area. Check this out. This is swallowwort that's starting to climb up on the multiflora rose. I'm not sure if this is the pictorial definition of irony or just poetic justice. It's a little hard to say for sure. Swallowwort is a relatively new invasive species to our area. There's two different types of it, black swallowwort and pale swallowwort, which are different species. And except when they're in bloom, they're almost impossible to tell apart. Swallowwort has a vining growth habit. This infestation was climbing all over the rosebush last year, and I cut it all back. Looks like I missed a few stems, though, so I'll have to come back with my clippers and maybe pull these out by the roots. This plant is native to Eastern Europe, and it may have come to North America as an ornamental plant that escaped from cultivation and has become invasive in our area. Think about this. A square meter of this plant can produce over 1,000 seeds per year, and the seeds are wind dispersed. They come in little pods that are kind of like milkweed pods, and so it can spread quite widely and quite quickly. A small infestation like this might actually be controllable. I can come out and pull up these plants, being careful to get as much of the root crown as possible. But larger infestations are really, really difficult to get rid of. Mowing does not eradicate the plant, but it can prevent seed production if you do it at exactly the right time. You need to mow while the seed pods are immature. If you mow too early, the plant will just grow more seed pods. But if it's done too late, when the seed pods have matured, all you're doing is spreading the seeds and making the situation worse. And now I'll turn it over to Mike, who's going to talk about some other new invasives that are on the rise in our neighborhoods.
Hi, I'm Mike Fargione, Manager of Field Research and Outdoor Programs at the Cary Institute of Ecosystem Studies. There are many common invasive plants and animals like those examples Julie mentioned that have been here for years and have become naturalized. Yet new invasive species continue to be discovered as introductions are still happening. We also find new species that arrived elsewhere in the United States and have spread fast or slow and are finally reaching our area. Here are a couple of examples of species that have recently appeared in my neighborhood. Wild chervil is a herbaceous plant native to Europe. It looks similar to other plants in the carrot family, having compound fern-like leaves. Stems are covered with hairs and are hollow. The flowers are white and shaped in clusters that arise from a central point. Later, the fruit, which starts out green, turn brown as they open. Wild chervil can be confused with some other native and other non-native invasive plants like poison hemlock and giant hogweed. Some similar-looking plants can cause a rash or are poisonous. Be sure to make a positive identification before you handle any of these lookalikes. Although pretty for a few days in late May or early June, wild chervil is tall and aggressive and can outcompete other plants by forming dense stands. The seeds can be spread by animals, machinery, and the wind. Wild chervil started to show up along my road a few years ago, and as you can see, it has really taken off. Most likely it has been spread by the highway department as they mow the road shoulders during the summer. Mowing or pulling the tops is not an effective way to control this plant. Digging up the entire taproot and chemical controls are more effective. Cleaning mowers and other equipment before moving them between sites can help prevent its further spread. The bottomland forest surrounding my backyard is dominated by white ash, American elm, and red maple. Unfortunately, within the last year, many of the ash trees have started to show symptoms of decline. More than 24 have died and many appear to be unhealthy. The decline and death of these white ash trees is the result of the emerald ash borer, one of the many invasive forest pests that are accidentally introduced into the United States. Although EAB, as it's called, was first discovered in Michigan in 2002, the symptoms of this insect have just started to appear in my neighborhood over the last 12 months. EAB probably came from Asia inside wooden packing materials from pallets or shipping crates. It seems to only attack species of ash tree. The adult beetles are quite beautiful, metallic green and about a ½ inch long. They lay their eggs in the bark cracks and crevices. The larvae hatch from the eggs and eat their way inside the bark. There they chew the inner bark and phloem and eventually starve the tree. As they turn into adults, they chew their way out of the bark, leaving a characteristic D-shaped hole. Careful observers will see the first signs of infestations as the dieback of the tops of the trees. Most of us take first notice as the outer bark is picked away by woodpeckers that are searching for the young insects. Without protection provided by repeated insecticide treatments, All ash trees seemed eventually to succumb to the insect's damage and die. But scientists remain hopeful. Someone is going to find an ash tree with natural immunity to this insect. So don't cut down your living ash trees assuming they're going to die anyway. It could turn out that you have the one that helps to save this important group of forest trees. Effective methods to control invasive plants and animals are specific to each species. Talk with an expert. Consult reputable websites such as the Lower Hudson Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management for help identifying invasive species and the best management practices for their control. Look for more information about our organizations and our efforts to understand, educate, and manage about invasive species at our websites. Thanks for joining us.